Back in the mid to late 80s, I was a middle school teacher at a middle school in Worcester, and since this is the internet, I'll go off on a limb here and assume that there are many people out there who don't know how to pronounce that. Remember when they taught you how to read new words by just sounding them out? Yeah, that's bullshit. It's pronounced Worcester, but it's spelled W-O-R-C-E-S-T-E-R. Anyway, it was called Bennett Junior High School. I'm not sure if it's still called that. After all, junior high is a phrase that seems to have largely been phased out in favor of middle school for fuck knows what reason. I'm not gonna lie, it was a shit school. If children are the future, then the town of Worcester took one look at Bennett Junior High and thought, I'd rather kill myself than live in that future. And honestly, I can't blame them. The kids had zero interest in learning. They were far more preoccupied with listening to music, shouting at each other, making out, fighting, fucking. You get the idea. And hey, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like we teachers were blameless in all this. I gave up on any student unwilling to listen to me after my first 2 years. They didn't care, so I stopped. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but it's what happened. Judge me all you want, I don't give a shit. But anyway, that's not the point here. I've been thinking about Bennett Junior High because I always think about Bennett Junior High when October rolls around and people start putting up their Halloween decorations. Perhaps I ought to change that to September. I have one neighbor in particular who puts up a paper skeleton on the front door, and it reminds me of a rather tasteless prank pulled by one of my students when I was at Bennett. I was a biology teacher, and among the many visual teaching aids that were in my class was a model human skeleton made from some kind of cheap plastic. It didn't exactly serve any practical instructive purpose. It was more a matter of, oh, you have a biology classroom? Well, here, have a fake skeleton. Because science. I don't even cover human anatomy in my curriculum, partly because of the state standards and partly because I think it's boring. At least it's more boring than teaching something like evolution. With evolution, there's always the opportunity for some spicy controversy from dumbass fundamentalist parents. And even if there isn't, it gives me an excuse to talk about dinosaurs. And come on, who doesn't love dinosaurs? I named the skeleton Bones. Real fucking original, I know. After my first few months teaching at Bennett, I found myself inexplicably venting at the skeleton when no one else was around, or at least when I didn't think anyone was around. I'm sure the janitor called me at least twice. I would be grading papers after class, and if I got to a particularly bad one, I would look up at Bones and go, God damn it, Bones, I am really bad at my job apparently, or something like that. And he would just sit there, suspended just a few inches off the ground, his jaw eternally hanging as if stuck forever in mid-guffaw. But on October 18th, 1986, Bones mysteriously disappeared from my classroom. I came into work that morning only to find the stand where he was hung empty. Instantly, I suspected one of my students. Not anyone in particular. There were many likely suspects. But it was the season of pranks. I always noticed a small spike in mischief around October, especially late in October. For whatever reason, I was singled out, as none of the other teachers had anything of note stolen from them, except this one guy who said a stapler was missing, but that's hardly a real prank. I tried to get myself riled up over it. This was theft and potentially damage to school property. I talked to the principal, we interrogated a few students, asked the janitor if he saw anything. But after we still didn't turn anything up, it was hard to care at all, really. It was a dumb plastic skeleton that I never even used. It's not as if someone had stolen the Hope Diamond or something. After Halloween passed, I was starting to think that this wasn't so much a prank as it was someone just stealing something for the hell of it. By the end of that first week of November, I was ready to give up on ever seeing my slack-jawed friend ever again. And I never did. But when I came into work on November 9th, the rack was no longer empty. There was a skeleton hanging there, suspended just behind the neck. Now I instantly knew that this wasn't Bones because it was a real skeleton. Well, okay, it's a little more complicated than that. What I mean to say is that instead of being made of cheap plastic and colored a sort of faded manila, these were actual human bones. Stark white, bone dry, and smooth along most surfaces, but rough and rugose where the cartilage connected them to one another. but it wasn't so much a skeleton so much as it was bits and pieces of different skeletons. Because I may not like anatomy, but I learned it, goddammit. The comparatively robust jawline suggested a male, but the wider hips were definitely female. The femurs were of significantly different lengths, and this fellow was certainly not a good dancer, because they had 2 left feet. My first initial thought upon seeing the composite character was that I had been given a real, if mismatched, skeleton as an upgrade to my accurate but plastic one. But this didn't make any sense, because I should have been notified about something like that. You'd think that when I went to see the principal, he would have said, "Oh, didn't you hear? You're getting a new chimera skeleton." So this led me back to the idea that it was part of a prank. If so, well, it was a pretty morbid prank, far beyond the bounds of any reasonable definition of good taste. Needless to say, there was an investigation. Turns out my anatomy training wasn't completely useless, as I was correct in my original estimation that the remains came from multiple individuals of different sexes. The police took the bones away to see if they might be able to match them to any of a number of missing persons cases from across the Tri-County area. And that's all I ever really learned on the matter. I checked the paper for any news after that, but as far as I know, nothing ever came of it. A few of the staff, and even some of the students, were taken into questioning, but again, nothing but dead ends, at least as far as I could tell. I mean, it's been a couple of decades, maybe that's changed now. I wouldn't really know, I moved out of Worcester years ago, now I teach at a community college in Connecticut. But every October, or rather September, when people start putting up their spooky, scary skeletons, it just makes me all nostalgic for that shit show of a school, and brings me back to what I guess must be both the best and worst prank ever pulled at Bennett Junior High School.